Hi, Renaldo. How are you?
Hey, Josh, doing great. Glad to be here.
So, Renaldo Pearson, you are a millennial leader, activist, scholar, and now executive director of Democracy Spring. Is that correct?
Co-mission director. We're leaderful.
Co-mission director. Excellent. So, let's start with Democracy Spring, and we'll work our way back to talk about some of your activism, some of your studies, and what led you up to this moment. Tell me what is Democracy Spring and what is it doing?
Yeah, so Democracy Spring is a civil resistance movement organization that is committed to using nonviolent direct action to mobilize against the corrupting influence of big money in politics and voter suppression. So back in 2016, April 2016, we organized the largest act of American civil disobedience this century, where we marched from Philadelphia all the way to Washington, D.C., culminating in over 1,300 sitting in and getting arrested to bring attention to this, again, corrupting influence of big money in politics and voter suppression. So Democracy Spring is dedicated to doing just that, mobilizing until we win a society where everyone has the right to vote, and where we see legislation that reigns in on what I call the seven deadly sins of American democracy.
Okay, I just had to make some adjustments there. Hopefully it's working now. When you say civil disobedience and you say the largest act of civil disobedience, what does that mean? What does civil disobedience mean?
Well, it's when people put their bodies on the line to get into what John Lewis called good trouble. It's what Gandhi referred to, what Dr. King referred to, and in so many terms, no major democratic struggle in American history has been won without that weapon that Dr. King called the sword that heals, nonviolent direct action. So whether it's the American Revolution, to the abolition movement, to the women's suffrage movement, to the civil rights movement, to the farm workers movement, the labor movement, you name it. Nonviolent direct action or civil disobedience has been used every single time. Folks are putting their bodies on the line, using their bodies as a moral representation of their legitimate discontent to the status quo. So they might be breaking a law, but they're doing so to bring attention to some type of unjust law, policy, or status quo.
So, a lot of people, as we engage in these conversations with millennial leaders like yourself, I've started to see a lot of fear in older generations. And the things that they are afraid of, Renaldo, socialism, they're concerned about young people, disregarding the system that's been built, disregarding the hard work of many generations. When you talk about nonviolent direct action, do people get afraid?
I haven't seen them get too afraid. I think it's helpful when I remind them that nonviolent direct action is not just a leftist tool, that it's, I remind them of the story of the Birmingham campaign, which was a seminal moment of the civil rights movement in 1963, where during the Birmingham campaign, the children who got involved filled the jails. And Dr. King, the SCLC, they encouraged parents that, if their children participated, that they would bail them out. Well, they didn't anticipate that many children showing up. And it was actually Republican New York Governor Nelson Rockefeller who provided the funds to bail those kids out. So, this is about deep patriotism and real patriotism, where folks stand up and say, our Declaration of Independence and our American Constitution actually promise us more than what the status quo is giving us. So since our leaders in government are not changing this or realizing, our promise, we're going to put our bodies on the line to create a more perfect union.
Now, do you think that this is this against a certain political party? Are you saying we need to use nonviolent direct action because we have one or the other political party in power? Or do you see these issues as system-wide issues? In other words, what are you going after?
Well, I think it's important to rewind to my own kind of odyssey or journey. I started in 2013 as a criminal justice advocate, and quickly became the youngest member and spokesperson of the 200-member historic End Mass Incarceration Coalition. And we got some, pretty significant victories from the Obama administration. But it became clear to me that if we wanted to see change, I hate to use two words that are similar, CEE and CEA. If we wanted to see change, we realized that type of change needed to take place at the congressional level. So I actually then came across this TED Talk by Larry Lessig, who's since become a good friend, on the corrupting influence of big money in politics. And that's when I began to see that our Congress members are spending 30 to 70% of their time fundraising for re-election. And in the process, fundraising from the tiniest slice of the 1%. So they literally become beholden.
That seems natural to me. If you've got a republic, which we do, and it's a system where there's no limits on campaign finance, spending and or giving, it seems to benefit those who are in that position.
Well, not when, again, they're kowtowing to the tiny slice of the 1% at the expense of the many. And how do I know this? Well, look where our public trust in government is today. Look where polls show the vast majority of Americans are in terms of a living wage, in terms of gun control, in terms of campaign finance reform. Interestingly enough, that polls just as high as gun control.
Campaign finance reform and gun control are on the same level in terms of people's interest. Yes. And are we talking all people, all demographics, just millennials? What are we looking at here?
We're looking at all people, yes, all demographics across party lines or political persuasions. So the egalitarian agenda, per se, actually posed quite high. So when we're able to rein in on campaign finance to make it more responsive to small donors, as opposed to this handful of the wealthiest few, then we'll get legislation that represents the public interest. So here's the thing. That's why Democracy Spring came into existence, to organize around, again, reining in on the corrupting influence of big money in politics and also voter suppression. However, the 2016 election underscored just how broken this system is. That's when I began to see what I call the 7 deadly sins of American democracy. And this is a transpartisan, not bipartisan, right? This is a transpartisan agenda. One, to lay out these 7 deadly sins. One is voter suppression, right? And despite internationally low voter turnout in the world, we've seen over 99 bills introduced in about 31 states alone last year. Right. So, that's voter suppression. And this takes form in a myriad of ways. I mean, you've seen polling locations close. We've seen new voter ID laws. And let's just talk about the impact there. In Wisconsin alone, I actually have a study that I pulled up here. In Wisconsin alone, we saw, I want to pull that up here because I think it's important to share. Yes, in Wisconsin alone, where Trump's margin of victory was about 23,000, a University of Wisconsin-Madison study reports that as many as 45,000 voters statewide were deterred from voting by Wisconsin's voter ID law. That's just one state.
Okay, so antiquated voter ID laws, and you could argue, well, people need their driver's licenses, or they should have their birth certificates to vote, right? But you should also argue at the same time, one could say, you've got a driver's license. Why isn't every American at the moment that they get a driver's license registered to vote? And why doesn't voter registration follow your place of residence like junk mail? It's crazy. It's so antiquated, right?
Exactly. So no, you're absolutely right. Again, I want to call our attention to, it's important to keep this top of mind. We have an internationally low voter turnout. So we should not be making it harder to vote. We should be increasing access. We should be making it easier. I agree. Automatic voter registration, same-day registration, vote by mail, all these things help to increase turnout. We should be making it easier. So that's just one thing. Voters.
That's one of your deadly sins. I want to say one more thing about that, and this is something. If you were to craft a republic so that people who are in power stayed in power via campaign contributions from a very small group of wealthy people, wouldn't it make sense to ensure that voter turnout stayed low?
Say that first part again. You broke up.
Like if you were going to build a democracy, democracy is a place where people vote directly on laws, right? But the United States is not a democracy; it's a republic. I pledge allegiance to the republic, right? To the, and so we've got that kind of.
Yet we start,
idea, right?
So there's a lot of wordplay on Republican democracy, and it's interesting that we choose when we say we are republic versus democracy, and I say that because we literally start wars, purportedly to spread democracy. Yet we're doing a horrible job of it here. So I mean, I'm not sure if this gets to the heart of your question.
Well, I'm playing devil's advocate. Like if you were going to create an extremely unequitable system where you wanted to maintain a system of campaign financing, which that's a big issue, then the way to do that is to ensure that most people can't vote.
Absolutely.
It's simple to me.
Absolutely. I mean, it's, when you look at these 7 deadly sins, and I've just started at the top of the list, some of these measures, number 2, specifically voter erasure, this issue of purging. I mean, these are some measures that we have usually, kind of consigned to the most repressive regimes in world history. And to see that they've made it to our shores, I mean, an estimated 1.1 million folks, disproportionately Black and brown, purged from the rolls ahead of the November 2016 election. And in fact, the Brennan Center for Justice just released a report 2 or 3 weeks ago saying it's worse than I thought. They're saying 16 million folks.
Wow.
Per 2014. And I actually met State Senator Hank Sanders. He out of Alabama, State Senator Hank Sanders out of Alabama. Here's a guy who walked across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, and participated in the Birmingham campaign with Dr. King and others. He went on to Harvard Law School and is now a state senator in Alabama. Do you know they purged his vote?
Wow.
The gall of them to purge his vote of all people. He's the one who tipped Greg Palast, the investigative journalist who detailed all of this this phenomenon in his documentary, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy. He tipped him off. And I actually was just with State Senator Hank Sanders a few weeks ago. And, he's slowing down and he's not seeking re-election, but he's encouraged me to keep fighting because what they've done with this trick is they've sent what amounts to junk mail. It looks like junk mail. They send this postcard to these folks' houses. Interestingly enough, they have a spreadsheet, right? And they said they would use social security numbers to identify these double voters. You've heard that phrase, right?
Yeah.
However, when the spreadsheet was leaked, social security numbers was not used at all. They used first and last name, irrespective of middle name, irrespective of suffix, irrespective of birth date, irrespective of social security number. So John Isaiah Brown in Michigan and John Joseph Brown in Georgia were a match, and both lost their right to vote. It wasn't that simple. They sent a postcard that looked like junk mail to the address of those individuals or that individual, and it was non-forwardable. So, you know, it didn't stay with a person if they moved or changed addresses. And if you did not return that postcard to the Secretary of State's office, that's when you were purged and you weren't notified. You'd only go to vote. And when you went to vote, you find out that your name wasn't on the registry, and then it gives you what's called a placebo ballot for insiders, because they're not counted. That is a provisional ballot. They're not counted 9 times out of the 10. So that's how this sinister, and evil plan was done. And let me just share some facts there on, the impact of voter erasure or purging through interstate crosscheck. Trump's margin of victory in Michigan, where there were 16 electoral college votes, was 13,107. That was in Michigan. Michigan's crosscheck purge list, 449,922 votes.
Wow.
Again, 449,922.
So many more people purged than it would have taken to swing the election in a different direction.
Literally. I mean, you have Michigan, Arizona, North Carolina, have the numbers there also, where Trump's margin of victory was in the tens of thousands. The purge list in those states were in the hundreds of thousands. Those three states.
So Renaldo, are you telling me that the system is rigged?
Absolutely. That's why I gave a speech at the Unrig the System Summit where we met in February.
Well, this type of stuff is so important for people to understand. And really, I think, regardless of whether you are a Republican, Democrat, Independent, or you fall into some other category, to understand the methods by which our quote unquote democracy, and again, we live in a republic, not a democracy. And it's so hard to hear. I know that just breaks people's hearts when they hear that, but that is actually the type of country we live in. It's really powerful for us to get this information from people like you, because you clarify what's broken. And when we understand what's broken, we can understand how to fix it. Tell me some of the initiatives, because I think we could go down the list of what's wrong. And I don't want to belabor everything that's wrong. I want to belabor some of the great things that are happening, some of the initiatives that are happening to fix things. Tell me what you and others in your circle are working on today. How can we get engaged in the initiatives that you are undertaking?
Right. So you look at those things, and we talked about voter erasure. Then there is felon disenfranchisement, the corrupting influence of big money in politics, number 4. Number 5, vulnerable voting systems and Trojan media, both of which Russia has, of course, tampered with. 7 being the Electoral College. So when you look at all of those 7 deadly sins, you see that there are about 10 or more pro-democracy countermeasures at the state level that can be advanced today, and in fact are already being advanced, Josh. We have automatic voter registration that has been advanced in 13 states, New Jersey being the latest, and Michigan is on the verge of being the 14th. Yeah. You have same-day registration. This is huge. Same-day registration is probably the best way to combat the voter purges.
Let me make sure I understand this. Same-day registration is, I'm not registered to vote, but I go to my polling place. What happens?
You can register to vote at the polling post.
On the spot, right there. I can register, I can vote.
With the right, of course, identification,
Yeah.
mail, some type of verification of your identity.
Now, is that the way it happens now? Is it that way currently, or do we have a system where most people can't do same-day registrations?
The latter. Most people can't.
Most people can't. So most states, most people can't do same day. That would be a breakthrough for the country if we could just, hey.
And I might add, it could be quite the security measure for, deadly sin number 6, vulnerable voting systems and Trojan media, because part of the issue with the Russian hack is if they're hacking, and penetrating voting systems in states like Florida or Illinois, both of which have been a part of this investigation, then election experts have said that they can delete folks off the registry. So same day registration.
What do you know?
Exactly. So same day registration is important in that regard also. So you have same day registration, voting, automatic voter registration. You have felon reenfranchisement. And Democracy Spring has partnered in Florida with the Second Chances Initiative there. Amendment number 4 is on the ballot this November to restore the right to, catch this, 1.5 million ex-felons right there in Florida alone. Florida,
So
go ahead.
Do you think, is it your opinion that people who are incarcerated should still have the right to vote?
We're talking about, first of all, several democracies in the world already allow voting in jail. So that's one thing. And I'm actually just saying that folks who've actually already served their time certainly deserve the right to vote. We're talking about 3 million folks.
So you're talking about people who've gone to jail and now they're out, but they still can't vote. Is that correct?
That's right. That's a shame. In fact, you got Human Rights Watch saying that no other country does this. Right? No other country disenfranchises such a huge segment of its prisoner or ex-felon and minority population specifically.
Well, what are most people in jail for these days? What's one of the biggest things that people are in jail for?
Well, unfortunately, it's been the war on drugs. And
drugs. It's my understanding that we actually have a U.S. president that smoked marijuana, at least one.
That's right.
That person did not go to jail, and they can still vote. So
That's right.
We have a double standard here. What's going on, Renaldo?
Certainly some injustice there. I would encourage folks to read Dr. King's letter from Birmingham jail where he details what an unjust law is.
So I think that's a very powerful stand to take. I know that some of our viewers, some people out there in Facebook land will argue against it. I know that we will get backlash and people will say, no, I don't believe that if you've been incarcerated or if you are incarcerated, you should have the ability to vote. It could change the tide though, ladies and gentlemen. This is a big deal. It's a big deal.
But in Florida, you've got a right-left coalition of Christians coming together around this issue. This is something we're seeing, one of the rare bipartisan efforts. You want to use that word, bipartisan? This is one of the rare bipartisan efforts we're seeing in Florida there. Folks are coming up and saying, yes, people do deserve a second chance.
So even people on the right, even people with the GOP, Republicans are agreeing with that as an initiative in Florida.
Yes, from the bottom up, absolutely.
Florida's a red state, always a red state.
That's right. From the bottom up, we're seeing, folks across political stripes come together and say, look, because this is not a black issue or brown issue. This is an American issue. We've got just as many, white folks who are suffering from this also across the country. We have an imprisonment problem, and that turns into a recidivism problem when you can't allow folks to participate and get back, be productive members of their community once they return. That's just one piece, felon reenfranchisement that can be advanced at the state level. Then there's ranked choice voting, which is very powerful.
Tell us about ranked choice voting. It's something I highlight in the book. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, Renaldo is in both the book. He's in both the Revolution Generation book, which you can get on Amazon. You can get at your bookstore. You can pre-order it on Amazon right now. The Revolution Generation. Oh, look at that. Oh, we can almost cheers books there in virtual time. You're quoted in both the book and you're in the film, the upcoming film, The Revolution Generation. One of my favorite inventions is ranked choice voting, but I think people get confused. Can you explain what it is for folks out there in Facebook land?
The best way to frame it is we currently have a system of A-B voting, right? So ranked choice voting is an instant runoff where you don't have to choose between the lesser of two evils. You can rank in order of your values, your ideals. You can say that a third party is not a spoiler, finally, right? You can say this third party actually represents the best of my ideals. So this third party is number one on my ballot, and maybe Hillary is number two, and maybe Trump is number three. And then you have a situation where, again, the spoiler alert is eliminated.
See if I can find a picture to support what you're saying here, Renaldo. This is very low tech, ladies and gentlemen. I'm holding this up to the camera phone, there we go. Ranked choice voting.
Yeah.
Keep going, Renaldo. Keep going.
That's right. And I would encourage folks to see the New York Times editorial on it. They have recently endorsed it. I serve on the board of Voter Choice Massachusetts, and Maine is the first state to advance ranked choice voting. But Massachusetts is on the cusp of becoming the second. And again, I serve on the board of Voter Choice Massachusetts, where everyday patriots here in Massachusetts are advancing that critical organizing work. And the Boston Globe, by the way, just endorsed it. So there's a lot of momentum. The American Political Science Association already uses it. Cambridge, this city, uses it. One of the major award ceremonies, it's either the Oscars or the Emmys. They use it also. I mean, it's just
the Oscars have had a few problems recently with their voting, so let's not use them as a good example.
I don't know if we had the problem so much as it was someone read the name wrong.
Right. Well, I tell you what, one other place that I understand has used ranked choice voting very successfully recently is Santa Fe, New Mexico, in the mayor race there to elect the mayor, and very positive results, very positive feedback from those people who participated in that election. Renaldo, I think we could go long and hard on these solutions. I want to switch gears again, if you don't mind. I want to know a little bit about you personally. How did you get to where you are today? You're at Harvard. You're co-mission director at a nonprofit organization. What led you to take the path that you are on today? And tell us, if you don't mind, how old you are.
Okay, I'll start by saying I'm 30 years old. Or if you look another way, since I'm a leap day baby, I'm 7 and a half. My birthday comes on February 29th, so every 4 years.
Okay, great. So but you're 30 years young too. That's another thing.
I love it. Yeah, I'll take it. 30 years young. So yeah, I mean, I went to Morehouse College, the alma mater of Dr. King, Julian Bond, and other notable freedom fighters. So I took a deep dive, naturally, in civil rights movement history and ecology. And, I can't, it's in the Morehouse ethos that you are a change agent in your community, a servant leader, and that you don't look past injustice. So for me, first picking up Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness, that got me started. And then growing to see how broken our democracy is, and how that broken democracy is where we as a nation must start in order to adequately address the existential tipping point at which we now stand. I mean, for me, this is not a choice. We're literally at an existential tipping point when you look at, global warming, and when you look at nuclear proliferation, among other things. You've got, on the one hand, climate scientists saying that it's this century, now or never, that we reverse the tide, or the species, our human species, will be extinct.
Just human species. That's it. I mean, they're not saying, koalas, for instance, or alligators, just humans. The stakes are relatively slim, Renaldo. I don't know what you're getting so excited about.
Right. And then, of course, you've got atomic scientists who've updated that doomsday clock to the closest point to midnight doom than it's been since the height of the Cold War in the 50s. So, Dr. King, interestingly enough, was assassinated on Thursday, April 4th, 1968. He was planning to deliver a sermon that Sunday entitled Why America May Go to Hell. And, he was not able to deliver that sermon, but he did leave us some clues. Among the clues he left was the fact that either we will live, that is, learn to live, either we will learn to live together as brothers or perish together as fools. When you look at those colorblind emergencies, those existential threats that we face as humankind, right? Those quotes and that sermon is more prescient and applicable today. And if we are to address them in earnest, we've got to fix our broken democracy, and we've got to transcend the age-old trick of divide and conquer politics and allow the better angels of our nature to prevail once again. So that's what fires me every day. I want to have kids, in the not too distant future. And
are you single? Because we are on Facebook,
I am talking to a very special young lady right now who.
No, you're actually talking to a man, just so you know. That's, at least I identify as a man. That's No. I appreciate the sentiment, Renaldo. I do.
That would be a fallacy of equivocation. No, I am talking figuratively.
Okay, I'm just saying you're a good-looking guy and all, but I'm married, and I don't really go that way.
Oh no. No, I'm talking to figuratively to a beautiful young lady right now who.
Oh, you're texting while we're having this interview. I knew it. That's such a millennial thing to do.
Give me a break, brother. Give me a break.
You know what? Any young lady that has your attention and affection, she's probably very, very fortunate.
Oh, I'm fortunate to be talking to her, and hopefully, within the next year or so, we'll see what happens.
Ooh.
But yeah, I see that she's watching now.
Ding! She just tuned in, didn't she?
Yeah. No, but no, I seriously, I want to have kids, in the not too distant future. And, should this world of ours still exist, they will ask, they will look back on this time, history will judge this time. They will look back and say, what did you do to prevent the doom that we were to inherit? And I want to honestly look in the eye and say I tried.
Sorry, Naldo, we just had a little audio interference there.
John, you just fine if it counts.
Just lost your audio here, Renaldo. I don't know if you can hear. Can you still hear me?
I can hear you just fine. Hello? Testing. Testing.
Got a bad audio connection for some reason.
Okay, can you hear me?
Oh, all of a sudden it's okay again.
Oh, there we go.
Who knows? Sorry about that. I felt like we were in a great moment of flow, and then we just lost the audio for some reason.
Where'd I drop off?
You were proposing. No, I'm just kidding.
Stop it, please. I've only been talking to her since May, so
I'm not sure where you left off, but there's an interesting quote that came in here. McCall Jones, who's tuning in live, says the majority of those incarcerated are men, and since they lose the right to vote forever, what is left in the inner cities is the near complete absence of men voting for generations, which means in rough terms, the overwhelming majority of voters are women. And so he goes on and on and on, but he says it's a vicious cycle, I had never thought of it in those terms. That is very profound.
Yeah, I mean, Michelle Alexander talks about how, there's a phenomenon in the Black community where Black men are absent. She first details the number one approximate cause of this, right? And that is the fact that there are just more Black women than there are Black men. In fact, 2.6 million more Black women than there are Black men. No other race has this gender disparity. But second on the list is the criminal justice system, right? And we don't need to go back into the details of the disparity there. We know that, even though Blacks and whites use drugs at the same or similar rates, Blacks are disproportionately targeted for mostly low-level possession of marijuana.
Yeah, which is so ironic because, look at the number one growing industry. California has traded marijuana for silicon, the dot-com bubble, the app bubble. Even the cryptocurrency bubble is not holding up to the marijuana bubble. So, it's going to end up making states and governments tremendous sums of money, and we have tremendous numbers of people incarcerated for it. I don't know. That doesn't seem to make sense to me.
No, and I think it's important that these states start to write in those who haven't, and that's the majority of them, some law where they're allowing the folks who've been most affected, most impacted by these unjust laws to be a part of the entrepreneurial, wave that is coming with this new opening in our economy. Especially given the fact that many times in many states, you still have to check the box if you've been arrested. As a result, as a result of this, they don't have employment many times, or they can't get employment. And that also contributes to this vicious cycle of male absence in our communities.
So let's I think we could talk for a long time. And for those of you who are just tuning in, I'm talking with Renaldo Pearson. You are the mission co-director at Democracy Spring, a millennial. Sorry, did I get it wrong?
Co-mission director. It's all right.
Co-mission director at Democracy Spring, a millennial leader, an activist, an advocate for nonviolent direct action. Renaldo, you're also premiered in the Revolution Generation book. Tell me what people at home can do. How can they engage with some of the actions that you're taking? Where can they find more information, and how can they help you?
Sure. So you can go to democracyspring.org and sign up to be a part of our newsletter. We have a nonviolent army of subscribers of about 40,000. And you can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter, about 60,000 or so followers there. But I want to make sure that folks are also checking their voter registration. Because especially with regard to number 2 on that list of 7 deadly sins, voter purging, right? Voter erasure. You need to make sure that you're registered and that you haven't been purged from the list now. So it's not a surprise when you show up to the polls. So you can sign up there.
And how can folks check their voter registration? Sorry, tell me that.
You can Google voter registration in your state and find that your Secretary of State or State Board of Elections has it online for you to check.
Yeah, and there's also, we premiered this in the newsletter last week, TurboVote, turbovote.org, nonprofit organization. You put your email address in, you put your zip code in, and they will alert you as to your elections. They will tell you your polling place, help you get registered. Very, very, very useful tool, turbovote.org. So just a little plug for that nonprofit.
That's registering, not checking the status.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so you've still got to check that you're registered. What else can people do, Renaldo?
I think you can plug into the local and state movements in your state. And if there isn't one, reach out to us and we'll help you launch one to advance the pro-democracy countermeasures to those 7 deadly sins, whether it's ranked choice voting, whether it's automatic voter registration, whether it's same-day voter registration, whether it's independent redistricting commissions to rein in on gerrymandering, whether it's felon reenfranchisement like that in Florida, but that's not the only state, or vote by mail, which is also proven to be quite effective. There are quite a few things that can be advanced at the or small donor elections. There are quite a few measures, again, about 10 that can be advanced today at the state and local level, that we need, a new wave of patriots to rise and say, we're going to build a democracy that works for everybody.
It's great. It's great, Renaldo. Renaldo Pearson, everybody. One of the voices of the many young leaders that I met that I just thought, you are articulate, you are powerful, you are a change maker. I can see you, Renaldo. I can actually see you one day, not just running for office, but being a phenomenal political leader in some way, shape, or form. You would have my vote today, this minute. I tell you that right now.
Thanks, Josh. Can I add something? There's something that we won. Democracy Spring was amongst 25 organizations that push House and Senate Dems. I actually sent you an email about that. It was a major victory back in June. This summer, we pushed House and Senate Dems to announce their new Better Deal for Democracy. Of course, they announced Better Deal already, but they added this for democracy component, which includes major pieces of legislation that would actually rein in at the national level those 7 deadly sins. So campaign finance reform is included, revitalizing the Voting Rights Act, independent redistricting commissions, and new ethics reform. It's a huge step in the right direction, and they released this ahead of the midterms, and should they get elected, would advance it. I would also encourage folks to check out the update to that Better Deal for Democracy platform, HR 975, I believe, Government by the People resolution by Paul Sarbanes.
So it's a House bill, HR 975.
Right.
All right. Yeah, folks should check that out. And Renaldo, how can people follow you? Are you on Facebook, Instagram? Where do you check in on your social media?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, Renaldo Pearson. Facebook same, and Instagram the same.
Okay, great. Thanks everybody for listening. Don't forget to share this across your platforms on social media, especially on Facebook. And don't forget, get your copy of The Revolution Generation now so that you get it shipped to your doorstep. It'll be there on September 18th. We've got a big secret premiere of the film coming in Los Angeles. I'm hoping to see Renaldo there and a lot of other great folks. We'll be updating social media with that information. Renaldo, I'm so excited always to speak to you. Really interested to see where you go with your career, with Democracy Spring. I think you remind me of little pieces of video that I've seen of, Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. And I think you are an inspiration to young people. I hope you continue your political activism and your leadership. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Josh. I'm completely humbled by your remarks.
All right. Renaldo Pearson, Josh Tickell, everybody signing off. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Take care, guys. Bye-bye.